This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Budget workshop number 2. A couple of things that I wanted to just circle back to from last week. I just want to remind people we identified 4 budget priorities at the start of this budget development process: to meet all contractual obligations, to preserve both certified and non-certified positions, to continue to improve student achievement throughout the district, and then continue to increase student access to technology. Following last week's meeting, given the pace at which we went through items, I asked the Director of Special Services and the Director of Educational and Informational Technology to join us tonight in the event that if we have time, we can move right to them. So, because there's really not a lot to talk about with the middle school and the high school, and we'll get to that in a minute. So any questions or anything from last week that you want to have clarified?
I have a quick question. It's about the amount of money that's in the library.
Yes.
Which is good, because I know it's an increase. My question is, how is that money divvied up? I assume by schools?
It is divvied up by school and by student population.
Okay,
$15 per student
okay.
is the amount.
Oh, okay, so Green Acres, because they have about half the population of Ridge,
Correct.
would have less.
Would get less.
Okay.
And it gives the librarians a good pool of resources to be able to get different texts for their libraries that are appropriate for students.
Well,
at their age group.
well, you know, in elementary level, there's some standard,
Right.
really good books. They're called Caught Winners and Blueberries. Do they bulk buy also?
They do.
Good, great. Thank you.
Another item I just want to raise, and this is my fault. I neglected to tell Mr. Blumenthal that our middle school, high school athletic meeting had moved up a week, and he had a conflict this evening. So I met with him yesterday, and I know Dr. Dalley has spoken with him, so we have his information,
Okay.
which is pretty minimal as well. So, but he had every intention of coming, and that was my oversight, and I apologize.
We're gonna make you do laps now.
Let's make him attend the game.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I flustered Bob, that word laps. I'm sorry.
laps will do it. So I thought what we would do is just work through. We'll start with the middle school, we'll move on to the high school. We'll hopefully be able to talk with Director of Special Services and then move on to Director of Technology, Educational Information Technology. And within the high school one, we will also cover athletics. Okay. So, our middle school budget really is, in general, a maintenance budget. There are no new positions requested. There are really no large ticket items. I don't know if there's anything you want to emphasize, Phil, but it's really continuing the programs that we have.
Right, the only that you can possibly consider large ticket items are in our, maybe some of our instructional supplies or
Right.
textbooks, and those have all been vetted already by CNI.
Yes.
So other than that, no, I mean, as usual, our process is to meet with the coordinators. You start with wants and then you trim it down to needs, and they always do an excellent job with doing that. So yeah, there's not much to.
No, I have to say that, also I should have mentioned this in my opening comments, that as I said last week, each of the administrators in this second round also developed what I believe are very responsible budgets, asking what they needed and also making us aware of what they wanted. And we have a wish list, which we keep, of things that, as we come into money, which doesn't happen very often, but as we come into money, those are the purchases we make with that money.
And to kind of tie into what Phil said, we'll have some textbook requests that'll come through CNI, like there's middle school social studies. And as we're vetting through that right now, we're looking at getting digital resources and then hard, like one classroom set of actual textbooks to have. So it's like the best of both worlds. So we're trying to like pan out those pieces, but that's what those requests are, that are the slight increases at both the high school and middle school.
Amen?
I do have a question about the textbooks. I was happy to see that there was like a little bit of an increase in requests for textbooks this year, which is great. But overall, it seems like we're trending down in our request for textbook money. And I'm wondering if this is a symptom of just typical ebbs and flows in the need of textbooks, or are we also utilizing digital resources differently in order to save money? Is it both?
It is a bit of both, and we've really been, we're trying to make that switch to the digital resources now that we have the Chromebooks. We'll have them at the middle school, we have them at the high school, and even at the elementary, we're starting to get some digital books for students as well. So that's kind of the shift there. There's still money in there, because obviously we still need funds even if they're digital.
Also, the purchase of textbooks often depends on the curriculum work that's been done or is anticipated to be done prior to the start of the year. And I think that everything that is going to be worked on or has been worked on is accounted for in the budget. So it's just a year in which there wasn't necessarily as much textbook. I mean, it was more than before, but it wasn't.
We're not buying we're not buying 200 civics books anymore. You know what I'm saying? So that's reducing it. We may get a license for a particular textbook and then, like I said, one classroom set.
And I think that we can be clear with some of the textbooks, et cetera, that we're doing, is we're being current with our books within a few years. Is that correct?
Yes, we have each area on a 5-year cycle that we revisit on a regular basis, so we can.
And honestly, some are really moving into digital resources and articles that are more appropriate than getting kind of locked into a textbook that's obsolete as soon as we get it as
Right,
well.
which makes sense financially.
Yeah.
In language arts, if you think about it, across all levels, but at the elementary level, we're not buying basal readers, we're buying
Trade books.
trade books, and so that's often less money.
And now we're getting licenses of many of those that each year we can build on because the license doesn't go away. We can just keep adding titles to it, so we'll move that up the grades as well.
Good, thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions you have?
I have tons of questions, but they're not textbook related. so-
Okay. Any questions for the middle school? Okay. And why don't you start?
Sure. Okay, so in like the detailed budget section of our budget packages, I have some fairly specific questions.
Okay.
So it would be on page 13. So it is $2,452.11, which is the late bus.
Yep.
I'm seeing that the line item for the late bus was introduced at the high school level when previously it was only at the middle school level, and the middle school was reduced. But overall, it's a net reduction in almost $3,000. And I'm just curious to see how are we accomplishing that? That's great. It's great news. But are we still offering the same services, and is everybody still kind of sharing them?
Yeah, it's Tuesday, Thursday, after school. We work with the bus company, they give us a price, and we sort of estimate based on that. And I think maybe one year it was just the middle school and.
One year we had a grant.
We
Yeah,
did have-
that's right.
High school
We have a
would pay
grant.
for it with a grant, then one year you paid for it fully to pay me back, which was only right.
Right,
And
of
then,
course. Of course.
And then we do kind of split it, and we had actually over budgeted for it slightly, and when we got the quote from the bus company, it was lower than we had planned for, and so that's the amount in there. But it does maintain that service.
Regarding that grant, I had heard not too long ago that a grant may be available again. So we
Good.
really need to
be
reach
great.
out to
Dave
Dave
Yacarino helped us
Yacarino,
with the last one, yeah.
He and I
Okay,
were having a conversation about a month ago, and he said there might be something on that.
That'd be great. I'd love to expand it to more than 2 days.
Yeah.
Because currently,
That's where the
we sort of
conversation
stack
came
our
from.
activities on those 2
Yeah.
days so more kids can take part in them.
And you do have we have a lot of students that take advantage of that.
We have, today, we took our pictures for the yearbook for all the clubs and activities we offered, and it took almost all day. I mean, and we didn't realize, just hearing all the names being called out and calling the kids out, we do offer a lot. And the kids take advantage of as much as they can, but if they can't get transportation, that
Right.
limits them, so. the more
Dr.
days, the
Daly,
better.
will you take that action? Or reach
Yeah,
out to
I'll
him?
talk with
Thank you.
Dave, yeah.
You can mention that I mentioned it.
I will, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then on pages 21 and 22 of the detailed section again, I'm looking at instructional new, replace, and non-instructional new equipment requests. Specifically looking at the 2020 initial versus the 2020 superintendent budget columns, because I'm just kind of wondering, can you tell us a little bit about what we are not asking for in this budget? I realize that it's, those items, those columns were significantly reduced between the original requests and what is coming before us now. So I'm just wondering, what are we deprioritizing?
Well, I believe some of the, I see the one line for computer that was reduced from 3,000 to 760. A lot of that stuff goes into Jen's budget,
I do believe it's in technology, Jen.
in the technology.
A lot of things do end up getting moved technology-wise. If they used to buy textbooks and now they're buying licenses for social studies software to kind of cut the cost of needing all those textbooks, then they put that with the software in technology. So it's just being coded differently. So you'll probably see an increase in a 14-16 corresponding line item. And so that's where most of it goes.
Okay. Great, thank you. That's it for the middle school for me.
May I ask a question?
Of
Actually,
course.
we can go right from middle school to the high school. The consumables, and I really mean that for the culinary arts program.
Yeah,
That which is consumed.
Right, yeah, no, well, I mean, flour, sugar, I mean, that's what you need to run a culinary program.
Right.
Do we have enough money that take us through the year? I'd hate for the teachers to be short, by the end of the year.
well, I know, working with Carol, she asks for what she believes she needs. So I don't think she's,
And it hasn't been touched.
right,
And
and
that hasn't
it hasn't been
been touched.
touched.
Okay.
So she speaks up for her program. She
Oh,
wants it to
I
be
know
a great
Carol.
program. So I know you know Carol. So I trust her. It's been great working with her.
Yeah, she's not shy, she's a very good advocate, and so she has done that.
Well, I guess my concern is more at the high school because it's a growing program.
Yeah,
And you're gonna be attracting more students, and that means you're gonna need more supplies. So I just wanted to make sure that there was.
yeah, and it is a thriving program, there's not much more room for it to grow because that
Right,
kitchen is
right.
in constant use. We even split the room, so we get the commercial side in use with the classroom side, but yes, absolutely, she has requested an increase over previous years in instructional supplies, and that's enough.
But the culinary program is also doing more catering than it has in the past, correct?
Yeah.
Of programs and,
Yep.
receptions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they do catering in district, and they do fundraising catering, where they'll create things like stuffed breads that they sell.
That's right.
So they have a lot of stuff. The other day, they did a food truck challenge, so kids designed a food truck in the business class, and then they actually went and cooked the food and teamed with the class. So there is a lot of cooking going on and eating, but the eating is all to a purpose.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. So we'll move on to the high school then, and Dr. Dell, as I reviewed your budget as well, there really are no large ticket items. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to highlight.
I mean, the budget, much like the middle school, as you said, it is, there are no new staff positions. It's a budget that allows us to maintain a high level of instruction. To your credit and the Board of Ed's credit, the process has been to ask departments what they need and let them put it forward. And so what you have here are the requests of our coordinators and then the ongoing request from the administration for the parts that are non-academic, ceremonial, graduation related, safety related. That's what's in the budget. And I think it's a pretty responsible budget, but it's also, we had an opportunity to ask for what we wanted and what we needed, and this is it.
Amanda?
So again, on the detailed view, page 2 of that, I am looking at line item 1,023.12, which is gifted and talented at the high school.
Yeah.
There's a $100,000 reduction there. And I'm wondering if somebody can help me understand where that's coming from.
On page 2 on the salaries.
It's page 2 on the salaries, yeah.
Yeah, what we found, going through the budget this year, we have a new set of eyes looking at it. So we have detailed lists of every single teacher, person by person, every single teacher, their salary, their degree change, their step change. And we found that in many cases, if you look at the line item right near the bottom, you see $1,479,130 in one line item.
Yep.
What we found was when the budget was assembled, massive amounts of employees were grouped into one line item. And what we did was take the time to figure out where each employee belonged. And so we then went into each employee and assigned them the code as to where, what school, what department, what their function is. And we found, and you'll find this a lot in this budget, the adopted budget, where we found a lot of line items were collapsed and consolidated. And we had a lot of difficulty trying to figure out who's in there. So we just did a zero-based budgeting. Each warm body, each warm body, their salary, their step, their degree change, and then we entered that into the initial proposal. So
So
anyway.
we still will have a gifted and talented program at the high
Oh, most
school.
definitely.
Excellent. That is what,
No need to worry.
that is what we like to hear.
So anyway, that's a short explanation.
The next question that I have is for, it's on page 4 of the detailed view. And I'm thinking this is probably something similar, Frank, but just help me understand. It's 212, or it's 2120, 1812. It looks like a clerical guidance counselor. That's not an add to staff. Is that a reshuffling of an individual?
I'm sorry, what line are you on?
It's the
What
top line.
object code? The budget is laid out by object code.
Yep.
So you're in 1120.
1120. So
Yep.
I'm like, 2120, it's the top one. 1812.
Yep.
Okay, the very first one?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And it looks like that's a position that maybe wasn't in there last year, but I'm wondering, are we shifting FTEs from one bucket to another in that case?
Again, the same explanation.
Okay.
But just try, and so if you look at the bottom line,
Yep.
that's what you have to look for.
Yep.
So you're going from 1,196,000 to 1,219,000. That's you're roughly a $24,000 increase. And we did find shifts. We did find shifts between paras and secretaries, and we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out which bucket it belonged in. Some groups went down, some groups went up.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions specific to the high school. I have other questions though, so.
Okay. As far as that is concerned, and Dr. Dally, you can jump in and add anything that I overlook, but I met with Mr. Blumenthal yesterday, and he was, there were some equipment items that he asked for last year that were cut in last year's budget that he reintroduced in this year's budget. So it was, while they were new, it really wasn't new. The other thing that we talked about were assistant coaches for the track and field, both at the middle school and the indoor track at the high school, which really is attracting large number of kids and is becoming a supervision issue. But my suggestion at that point, when we spoke, was we're going to put proposals together to go to CNI, just so that the board is involved in this decision-making about if we're going to add another position. It's a stipend position, it's not a tremendous amount of money, but I don't want to do that without the board having a voice. So while CNI may not do athletics, they're the closest I could come
Or curriculum.
for curriculum. Yeah, so, is there anything I overlooked, Russ?
No, thing.
Okay.
Can I ask you a couple questions about athletic? Oh,
Yeah.
you got it.
Oh,
You go.
you've had like 2 rounds already, so. Quick question. I know last year, Steve talked about, made a proposal to add, I think it was a girls' hockey team and some other team. Are there any new teams being proposed?
No new teams.
Okay, just the same teams as last year?
Everything is.
Same, okay,
Yes,
okay.
no new teams.
I was gonna ask something along those lines, and the other thing, the stuff that he wants, the equipment he wants added in and the stipend, do you know like what the impact on the budget is roughly?
The stipends would be probably, if they were, would probably be about $3,000 each, so we'd be looking at $6,000 in stipends. And the equipment was, I think that, as we talked about it, it was equipment for, it was actually a variety of things that for various teams, that it was just their time in which he wanted to replace some things.
Okay.
And so that number is probably, let me look in my book and I can give you that exact number.
And there was one proposal that he had for, I think, like a uniform storage piece of equipment that's about $20,000, and we moved that to a wish list, thinking that we might have some end-of-year money available this year to be able to get that.
Okay, thanks.
That was just like a big one that stood out.
Dr. Cronin, while you're looking at that, can I ask, I think it's Bill, I need to ask, where was there a storage shed that the drama club would put all their things on? Was that from the high school or was that from the middle school?
I think we had that during the construction,
Yeah.
but then it was removed once the, where, are you asking me where it was
Yeah,
housed?
because, and I'm going back, sometimes you're at the grocery store, you're at a function, and people ask you about things. And one of the things was the drama cooperative had mentioned to me that there was no room for storage for their equipment.
Not that there's
for
no
their
room, there's never
clothes.
enough room.
Okay.
I mean, I think, even with the new building,
Yeah.
we find ourselves always
Yeah.
looking for storage space.
Is there somewhere else that you can allocate more space there, or is there something, is there still a bin? I don't know what we have.
They have off to the right of the stage, if you're facing the stage, there's a room that they're using primarily now, and I believe they need more as they build their sets. I mean, they house them backstage, but there's some that they want to keep, behind
Sure.
closed doors and that sort of thing. So I did talk to Debbie Villain about that,
Okay.
and she had talked about the possibility of getting another, smaller container. I think the
Okay.
other one was fairly large.
Okay.
I don't think they need something that large, and it was just a question of cost, obviously, and then where it would be housed. Before, it was between the two buildings, and I don't think that's available now because of
Right.
the landscaping and such, but
Okay.
we can always find temporary, I'm trying to help her find temporary space, because it's just from now until April.
April,
we have
okay.
to
Yeah,
house
just
it,
something
but-
came up to me, and as we're talking about the middle school, was just wondering where it was with the, what do they call storage bins were before, or how it was, and knowing that as the drama cooperative grows and puts on bigger entertainment, they're gonna need more room.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, I think the equipment, we're looking at approximately $20,000 in equipment.
Thanks.
And that's for a variety of sports.
And also, I know we do a rotation every couple of years on school uniforms, is that included in that 20,000?
Yes, that's part of it, yeah. Okay. Anything else for the high school or athletics?
No, I just took athletic right to drama.
I'm just curious, could you tell me what the play is gonna be at the middle school? I already know the high school.
It is Footloose. Which I was very excited for, but none of the kids even knew what Footloose was.
Really?
Yes. So we had to educate them. But
And at the high school, just for the camera, we are doing
Beauty and the Beast.
very
Okay,
nice.
so great, now I'm humming Footloose. This scene of Beauty and the Beast with the rose. Okay.
Questions, other questions? Amanda?
Do we have do we have a feel for what the total middle school, high school athletic budget is? Or is that something that I could get offline too? I'm not sure if we can look at it by code or if you guys just know off the top of your heads.
I don't know it off the top of my head, but we can get that for you. And I will email that to the board.
Thanks. And it looks like also athletic transportation costs have increased over the past 2 years. I'm wondering, does that have to do with the contract with M&J?
Yes.
So the same increase in costs would apply to athletic
Correct.
costs?
All
Okay.
across the board, there are increases. And this is the fourth year of a 5-year contract. And so we'll be going out to bid next year.
And Dr. Cronin, when our teams do well and they go into playoffs and we're using extra bus service, so if you have the football team making the playoffs and they're going to 4 or 5 different additional games from the year, with the swim club team going to the states for the swim meets, we have to pay for that, so that's all extra, and the last few years, our sports teams have done well.
Done very well, yeah.
So it's gone up, believe it or not, it's made the transportation costs higher.
The cost of success.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
Stay there.
I wasn't going anywhere. I like the seat, especially
So,
tonight, I don't have to do anything.
Why don't we talk a little bit about special education, which is probably one of our larger areas. And interestingly enough, one of our larger budgetary areas and our most unknown area for a variety of reasons. That will come out as we're talking. But Dana, I don't know if there's anything you want to highlight in your budget?
Nothing to highlight. A lot of it is status quo. Our early years of implementation are not costing us as much as they used to because we're here in a place that is, moving along as opposed to an initial cost. And there were just some budget changes in terms of moving what used to be in maybe an elementary school account because it was following children, has now moved to more of a central office account because those children have moved into middle and high school. But the work is still the same and the end product is still the same, but I couldn't continue encumbering money for those kids in an elementary account. So there was some shifting in those kinds of lines. But no really new initiatives, no dramatic changes in programming for next year on the horizon.
What about, without violating HIPAA codes, what about anything special that's needed for any children that will be moving up into the middle school or the high school, or any new children coming into the elementary school that may require special equipment or any kind of special,
I mean, we're starting, we start transitioning in our minds and our planning, we start looking at transition for next year right around the holidays. And so right now, any moves that would occur between the middle and high school are already accounted for in my secondary lines, which is the 2020. Any students from elementary to middle school right now are not looking like high-cost students. So there isn't really an impact in those kinds of transitions like there have been in the past. Even from pre-K to kindergarten, our numbers of students have increased, but in terms of their needs, they remain consistently high anyway. So they will remain consistently high for next year. But no real anomalies in the movement.
thank you.
I have a question. Correct me if I'm not remembering this correctly. I think on your slideshow that you mentioned that for the transition program, there was a slight increase in transportation.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
You're correct. There's a slight increase because of job sites.
And they
Oh,
need to,
yes.
on bad weather days, take the
So-
bus.
So we are in a good place, location-wise, in terms of being on the main road
Right.
where we can access public transportation. So we purchase passes to access public transportation for all of our young adults and their job coaches. And most of the job sites we can access are on the same line. However, because they are public school students, not, true adults out in the world, we do have to maintain their safety and their skills. And so we also encumber money with M&J in the event of things like inclement weather. The public transit bus stops aren't always safe
Or
for
shoveled.
students to access, especially
Or
students who
shoveled,
have physical mobility issues. So we will use an M&J bus instead, and that will be an added cost. We also have an increase in job sites that are not on the main road.
Yeah.
So our public transportation really doesn't help us when we have to access job sites, off of the bus line. So we also have to encumber M&J buses for those kinds of activities. So, the program is growing. We continue to expect it to grow just naturally. In opportunity and experiences for students. And so it also depends on the weather. So, one year we had the awful winter and we blew the M&J bus budget out of the water because we were using that bus all the time. This year, I think we've used it twice so far. So I can't always predict. We just put a cushion in to make sure that it's there and, should we need it, those students can access, the M&J buses instead.
Are your job sites all in North Haven?
Yes, they are all in North Haven. We are pursuing one in Wallingford right now. But it is a corporate job site, so it has to go through a lot of red tape at the corporate level.
Yeah,
We'll see.
yeah, okay. And for the students, that when they take the public bus, do they get the reduced rate?
Yes, we had, years ago, Nancy Ceballos worked with Connecticut Transit to secure special rates. I believe they fall under a category of student, people with disabilities, elderly, kind of your, protected groups there. They have reduced rates.
Yeah, well, that's good because the students can use those cards on the weekends.
Right, and that's the purpose, is we're transitioning them to adulthood, so use the passes for whatever you need. And they are really good at keeping themselves accountable to how much is on the passes, how often have we used them. And we buy them in bulk, so we get them at a cheaper rate if we buy in bulk in the beginning of the year. So we do everything we can to keep those costs down. It's just inherently I can't locate places only on the public transit line. It doesn't really work
Well,
that way.
the whole point of the programs is to get the students prepared for life after, 21, so,
Right,
I mean,
right.
yeah, you have to be on the bus.
Right,
you
and there are
know,
some community events that aren't in North Haven. So, for example, we are partners with the Best Buddies chapter at Yale University, which is age appropriate. And so, in order for us to get there, we actually, we could take the public transit line, but we would have to start at a bus stop at 5 a.m. to make all the transfers to get to Yale on time. So we have to use MNJ in those kinds of situations.
So good. Is the number increasing next year of students?
Yeah, it'll go up by a few
Overall,
students,
okay.
yep. And so we're excited about that.
Good. Yeah, it's a good program.
It's a great program.
Yeah, it is a wonderful program.
Very lucky.
Yeah. Actually, I see the students coming out of Petco and TJ Maxx, waiting for the bus.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, those are great partners.
Yeah, they really are.
They do a nice job with our students.
Anything else, Todd?
No, no, not just.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I do have a couple questions. Last year, the bus monitors came to a Board of Education meeting to
Yes.
kind of talk to us about the possibility of getting an increase.
Right.
Is that accounted for in this?
It is, and I actually met with sort of the head monitor there is, if you will.
Mr. Katz?
Mr. Katz, right?
Mr. Katz,
Yeah.
yeah. And we have laid out a plan so that that momentum continues, because they had gone many years without. And so those raises are accounted for in here as well.
That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
That's great, because they do fantastic work.
They do fantastic work, and they're an easy group to, unfortunately, overlook, because they're really not, they're at the bus company or at the school, and so we lose sight of that. And so I appreciate Sherman Katz coming in to talk with me.
I know they're happy because I ran into one of them at Gateway
Oh, good.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and he told me about it, and
Okay.
he was thrilled, so
Yeah.
that was good.
Yeah, they're very good people.
I've run into a couple of them and they've asked me about it. Uncle Nicky will be happy.
He is, he was the one
Oh,
that told
good.
me, so he's
That makes
very
me happy. And Dana, my understanding was we were working on bringing students back home to our district. Can you tell me a little bit about how that's going? Are we continuing that momentum, or are we kind of trying to maintain where we are right now?
We continue the momentum, although it has slowed a bit. The early years, it's funny, I just looked at our student count numbers from 2011, and in September of 2011, we had 50 students placed out of district. And I just looked at our numbers for this year, and we're down to 29. Now, some of that is students coming back to district because we built appropriate programs for them. Some of it is students attritioning out of just age or graduation and us not having to place new students out there. So it's kind of been twofold in our efforts to, provide students with, programming in our schools that was appropriate. But I will admit it has slowed a little bit. We are right now kind of brainstorming what the next steps have to be to jolt it into action again. This particular school year, September to now, I have not been able to bring any students back. We are looking at bringing back 2 students next year into our transition program, but we haven't brought that to fruition yet. There's more work that has to be done.
Is it a cost barrier, or is it, what are the barriers behind that?
One legitimate barrier is just truly students who have so much more greater need than I think many public schools can provide. We're not a hospital setting. We're, contrary to popular belief, we're not a social services agency. So when families really need a lot of wraparound services, intensive services, medical services, I think a lot of public school districts can only go so far. And, I think a lot of people in education are aware of the uptick in mental health issues.
Yeah.
So there does hit a point where it's really not healthy for anyone, including the students, really to be forced into our programs.
Sure.
So we still struggle with that, in transparency. The amount of students who are refusing to come to school for a lot of anxiety issues, a lot of depression issues. We've been very creative at the high school, and we created what we thought was the one variable that separated us in terms of the student to teacher ratio being so small and the physical facility they had to access being very intimate. We actually addressed that, and we continue to have students that are unable to come to school or get treatment and things like that. So, we've talked for quite a few years, mostly at the secondary level, about really those significant mental health issues. And it's beyond students who are oppositional defiant or beyond students who have just, some anxiety or some depression. These are students with real psychosis, true bipolar or schizophrenia or PTSD that, their treatment is more than educational. It really starts to become medical. So that's where we are right now with some of those placements.
I mean, I think another factor that I think plays at times is particularly with older students. If they've been out of the district for a period of time, now, as Dana mentioned, there were 50 students when she started. Actually, we started together. And you really have to sort of get consensus and buy-in from their parents as well, because the district had said to them, we can't do it. And then we come back and say, well, yes, we can. And so it's a matter of they're seeing our programs. It's building trust and confidence in us. And I think we've done that, and we have to just keep at it.
May I add something?
Yeah.
That is a retired special ed teacher. First of all, the record high was 63 outplacements
Oh my
about
God.
10 years ago.
That was before me.
Yeah, that was before you, yeah. But one of the things that we have some control over is some out-of-district placement schools are very good with working with our existing faculty to move the student back. And there's some schools, who I will not name, one in particular, that once that student walks out the door, it's a one-way ticket. And no matter how much you try to build trust, they're not working with you, so. I mean, I don't know, so I'm glad we have such fewer students, And we're working with districts that will actually send students back when it's appropriate.
I do believe the number should be lower still. I mean, as much progress as we've made, I still think we have room to improve on that.
Thanks.
The three programs that we've started, that Dana has started, have been instrumental. The intensive learning program, which we have beginning at the elementary level and going through high school for significantly impaired students. And then we have the therapeutic learning program for students with behavioral issues, that many of whom in the past we would not be able to accommodate. And I think people have done a really good job of trying to keep them home, because if we're able to do it, it's the right thing to do, if there's a way to find to do it in their own community. And then the transition program has been significant.
Right, our transition program, every one of those students in the past was a tuition, because we
Yeah.
just didn't have a program. So in any given year, 8 students is 8 tuitions that, we've been able to keep them in their community. They can access the supports around them. When they become adults, they'll already know how to navigate some of these systems. And so really, it works for everyone really nicely.
Any other questions for Dana? Okay, we'll move on to educational and informational technology. Do you want to talk about some of the movement, Jen, in the line items, because that's pretty
Yes.
significant.
Yeah, we moved a lot in terms of technology this year, so you see a lot of things going from zeros to high numbers, and you see a lot of things going from high numbers to zeros. A lot of the accounts weren't coded for technology. A lot of them were coded for either curriculum or central office. And working with Frank Connolly, we've really worked to clean up those accounts. So it's very easy to look at an account and know that something is iPads for the middle school library versus before it was just new equipment central office curriculum. It wasn't telling of how the money was being spent, and now we can really get down to the nitty-gritty of how much is being spent on software for Clintonville Elementary School. So you'll see a lot of numbers moving. You would also see a lot of salary numbers moving, because one thing that I had worked on in the summer of 2017 was moving all the staff members that were individual part-time people or individual paraprofessional people working in different buildings into one team that services the entire district. So while those people were moved last year, their salaries were not. They were not moved for this year. So we have no new bodies for next year. However, you will see that there may be some clerical or paraprofessional lines in the salaries that go down, and then all of a sudden it looks like technology booms, but that's actually representative of moving, I want to say 5 or 6 people into the same line, which is district technology staff. So it was just a lot of making things clean, you know.
If I could just say one thing there, I think that part of that change is the result of evolution of technology. So originally there were 4, there was a technology paraprofessional assigned to every school. And they were called computer aides. Well, that has evolved over time, and especially as we've gotten more equipment and Jen has come on board. So it really belongs in a sort of a unit unto itself.
And they truly do move to different buildings. We don't have anybody who just belongs to the high school, just belongs to Green Acres. You know, we do work in rotations or in shifts or in teams to tackle problems based on where the need is in the district, which I feel is a much better use of our staff capacity than being in a computer lab all day. We also don't have those types of traditional computer labs anymore, where everyone's going to go down and we're going to use the computer lab today, and the teacher needs us to get it set up for the students who are coming down. We have the technology teachers who use those rooms as their classrooms now. We put the Chromebooks into the classroom so the teachers can use the computers when they want to, not just when they can schedule, but when they can make the time to get into that room. So it's really changed, you know, how we use people to support our staff and students with technology. So that's the majority of the lines moving. There is some contractual increases in terms of software that we use, you know, Power School or, you know, websites and little pieces here and there. We have to renew a firewall license. We have bought with the firewall a 3-year license, haven't had to pay that for 3 years. Now it's coming due. I'm just going to buy a 1-year license. We'll see if we still like the firewall and how we're doing. So there are just little pieces. The only major player in technology for next year would be to add an audiovisual lease, which I believe originally in here it was at a higher number, and then we had just recently reduced down that number. So it would be a $30,000 per annum lease for 4 years. So it would get us about $120,000 worth of audiovisual technology, and this would mainly be focused next year at the high school, because the high school has not had any changes to their board infrastructure, meaning smart boards, Eno boards, Promethean boards, whatever you want to call them. They haven't had anything like that since the high school was built. So unfortunately that has left some of our teachers with boards that they don't even want, they don't use them, they don't need them. We need to get them out of there because they're taking up whiteboard space that the teacher would like to use for something else. And then we have teachers who really do want to use that interactive technology, and they don't have anything that will work with computers that were made in the last 5-6 years, because the technology on those boards is just antiquated. It's not what they need for instruction in the classrooms. So I put ClearTouch in as the item. It could be a different brand, but the general idea is something that's like an Eno board, but they're televisions. They're multi-touch, anywhere from 10 to 50 different points, so you could have multiple kids going up at the same time to touch them. They don't require projectors, which means less maintenance for cables and buying new bulbs, having to have people come out and readjust projectors. So they have long lifespans. I've depending on the brand, they'll tell you they'll last anywhere from 10 years to 18 years. Because just like a television that you put into your home, which is LED or LCD, they're smaller devices, they're skinnier, lighter weight devices, and you usually don't buy a TV and expect that you're gonna have to replace it or do any maintenance on it for a while, unless you want a big one. But that's one thing that's really nice and why many school districts are moving over to the TV model. It's less maintenance, it's less cost. Those light bulbs can range anywhere from $150 to $300 per bulb, and with how many we have in our classrooms, it gets expensive. So this is definitely the right technology to move forward with. We determined how we were going to place those at the high school by taking polls. I sent out a survey to the high school teachers. I said, do you want this? Because you never want to give someone technology and then just have it sit there. That's not a good use of anyone's funds, and that doesn't help our students. So the teachers who said, this is something I would use every day, I have a great interest in it, they were able to look at the boards that our business department at the high school got with a grant last year and say, wow, this is something that will be excellent for my instruction with my students. And it's not just something that a teacher uses in the instruction, because they're interactive boards, the students are getting to use them as well. And I think that's really important, because we see more and more this interactive technology in universities and colleges and in workplaces, and they're not getting that exposure to it in their last 4 years here in North Haven, and I think that's something that we really need to fix.
I still am reminded, Dr. Dalla and I were visiting classrooms at the high school one time a few months back. And we were in an English classroom and students were writing, and the teacher was responding to their writing online as they were doing it, and making comments about the suggestions for revisions, etc. And I thought it was just really, really impressive that the feedback was that quick, because feedback is essential when you're writing, and that it's coming back quickly is even better.
That's cool. So I have two questions. So you talked about leases, so they're not purchases. And how many are you looking at leasing?
So,
and the time period?
I believe that we reduced that amount. Originally, it was a $70,000 increase to a $30,000, so over 4 years. You're looking at roughly $120,000 worth of technology, and for that, I'm hoping, depending on what brand we get and what kind of deal we can get 20 to 25 of these devices to be used in teachers' classrooms, mainly at the high school, and hopefully to be able to get at least one for the library as well, so students can use this kind of thing, maybe something a little bit smaller for them, to actually plug their Chromebooks into and do group work and use it as their own tool as well. Again, giving them that exposure before they get to the university and before they get to the workplace.
So do you have places that is assigned to, or you're purchasing extra, not really knowing where you're gonna assign?
No, we have so much call for them that I have more requests for these than I think we'll be able to fulfill, but we can do this in stages. So this is where we're at this year. These are the people who are asking for it, promising that they will make good use of this, they will use this regularly in their instruction and those kinds of things. So yes, I have a list specifically where they will go, and then I have a waiting list of if those teachers leave district or what have you.
Okay. So the second question I have, I don't know if Ross too can jump in. So you said something about some teachers using it, some teachers not using it. Isn't there sort of like a curriculum standard that requires that you have to use this technology when you're teaching, so that students in the same grade level, pretty much are going through the same process, rather than teachers having to pick or choose, okay, I don't like technology, so let me follow the old style of teaching. Isn't there some kind of standard?
So there are, and Russ, you can speak better to this, but this is something that we're really working towards, because it would be very hard, I think, 2 years ago to have a standard for teachers that they had to use technology in their daily instruction when we had 4 laptop carts for the entire building, and we didn't have these boards. So the use of the technology by the teachers is certainly booming. Is every teacher using it on a regular basis? That I can't say, but I think we have to provide the access before we can set a precedent of expectation of using it. But I think I can say with confidence that every student is getting equal exposure to the technology, because we have teachers that don't necessarily teach at a grade level, They teach different subjects amongst different grade levels, and we have lots of students that are rotating through there. So you might have 2 teachers in a day that are very heavy in technology, and then you might go to one that, they're gonna have you pull out your Chromebook at the end of class and write something. So it's not a pilot, because we've already done the pilot through the Perkins grant money that Carol Ardito got, so we already know that the technology is good and that the teachers like to use it. But this is a first step towards, potentially maybe down the road, this is something that we would want every teacher to be using in their classrooms. But again, it's a very expensive thing, and let's make sure that this is the right direction, and that all of our teachers really like it, and that our students are responding well to it, and are gaining something in their education from it, before we say, this is gonna be what we require of our teachers, and let's put it everywhere. And then we have to support them to do that as well.
We have a grant,
Yeah.
we talked about it at our last Board of Ed meeting, just generally, that is going to be support, technology instruction support for teachers. And we're piloting it this year, it's just about $16,000, but it'll allow us to have somebody come in and work hands-on with teachers around lesson planning and how to integrate the technology appropriately into their instruction.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Goldie
Goldie,
also-
oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I can divide my time. Okay.
We're gonna both talk.
Yeah, I have that
Take the
bionic
good
power,
parts.
I can just like.
No, it's an
process.
excellent question, but I can tell you that the technology, we went to every student having, her and his own Chromebook, and they're getting tons of use. You see it throughout the building all the time, and there's also been a lot of change in technology. I mean, the best thing you guys did was hire Jen. It's been fantastic. She has a vision for this. She has rolled things out within an existing budget. She's made the money work beautifully, and she also has put together a team that takes care of not only the hardware, but also people, and trains in our school. And so we have professional development where they come in, they divide people by their skill level, by self-rating, and they differentiate instruction to people. And it's really resulted in a great deal of buy-in, confidence. People feel very comfortable. We have an online support ticket process where people can get help instantly. So people feel very good about this. And we've come a long way in a short time, and I think the trajectory is really strong for where we're heading. So I'm excited to have this new technology, and I know it will get well used. And I also think that's going to inspire everybody to get on board.
Goldie, the other thing I just wanted to add as another factor is that as we're rewriting curriculum, technology is being integrated into the new curriculum, so that those will be assured experiences that all students will have in time.
Okay, so by default, the teachers have to follow.
Right, if it's going to be a part of it, yes.
The curriculum, okay.
May I ask a question? And actually, it's a Jennifer Dana question. This has to do with assistive technology. Now that we have much more access and we have training, how has that impacted the assistive technology that's requested, as far as
Far less AT evals needed.
Okay,
Far less requests for evaluations, and even consultations. Jen, for the most part, Jennifer and her department have been able to address probably 90% of the assistive technology needs that we used to have and think were a problem. A lot of it was resolved by going one-to-one with many students, just naturally, universally, everyone has access now, so that made a difference. And then for students, I think, who still needed more or different, either Jennifer or someone on her team has had the expertise to go in and solve most of those issues.
great.
So, we're not processing nearly as many requests for evaluations as we used to. I think the universal system of technology in North Haven has really had an impact on that.
I also think that one thing that we've had an opportunity to do some hires, some new hires, and that has made an incredible difference in terms of the support we're able to provide teachers and students and in assistive technology in particular.
What's the largest demand? What technology is it that you have the highest demand in?
We have a lot of language assistance programs, word prediction programs, picture dictionary programs. luckily, I've worked with a lot of assistive tech specialists in the past. I know a lot of these programs. So at the beginning of the year, I bought some with bulk licensing. So that way, when it comes up that a student has a need, I try to buy suites of tools. So that way, it doesn't become a question of, do we have to go to an AT consult and an eval to see if a student needs this, which could be more expensive than just giving them the software. And then if they need that help from someone outside of our district that we can't provide, then we can go out and take another step. So I think it's helped us to get technology into the hands of the kids who really need it a lot faster. And just taking that approach of, instead of, let's wait and see, do we need it, expecting we are going to need this, and what's a reasonable number that we're expecting that we will need this for. In that way, I've seen a lot of improvement in terms of the kids using some of the tools. So I think it's working out.
Just, and I believe Dr. Valley alluded to this, in the brief time that Jen has been here, we have gone from, sort of a standard, typical, or traditional computer assortment in buildings to, after next year, every student in grades 3 through 12 in North Haven will have their own device. The middle school is the last bastion which we're going into because they were so new to begin with. But that's not additional money, we're working it through the monies that we have. But every student 3 through 12, and then every grade level in every building, K, 1, and 2, have their own cart of them. So computers are in the hands of kids far more than ever before.
That was actually going to be my question, that as far as, I knew, 3, 4, 5 all have Chromebooks now, and the high school did. I was actually wondering what we were doing at the middle school level.
That will be this year, when students return in August, then we will have that for the middle school as well.
So then each student in the middle school, so what you're saying is every student from grade 3 through 12 will have their own Chromebook?
Absolutely.
And the younger grades will have a card available to them?
Right,
That's
for
great.
each grade.
Yeah, I think, just my own 2 cents, I think it's great what you've done in the short time that you've been here. One of only things, and I don't know if it's really a budgetary issue, but one of the things that I've heard from parents is that they know that there's technology being implemented in school and students are using Google Classroom, and there's a lot of stuff going on, but I don't know if parents actually know what is happening on Google Classroom or what their students are doing, and if there's maybe a way that, like a presentation or something at an open house or something, just so when, students as well, it's on Google Classroom, a parent has just a better idea as to what is actually happening or what the kids are doing.
That's a very good suggestion. Because it has moved so quickly, it really does become a matter of communication. And are we keeping parents sort of along for the ride?
I have a question. As somebody that doesn't really know what's happening, we talk an awful lot about, and this is a big question, and I wouldn't be disappointed if you didn't have an answer right, off the top of your head. We talk so much about getting technology, using technology, implementing technology. I don't always hear us talking a lot about how well it works, or whether, in fact, it actually is improving learning. We talk about, say, a certain group of teachers that whether maybe they're not resisting it, but maybe they're not comfortable with it, and so they teach the old way. And another group that, is there any data globally or locally that indicates that learning improves through the use of Chromebooks and boards and so on?
Yes, and you can find probably 10 different studies that are all going to tell you different stories about how it helps children. Test scores, yes, if you're using these devices with kids in a supported environment such as we are, and you go into it with a plan supporting the teachers, then usually you do see the test scores improve. There was a giant study in Maine where they decided that they were going to be the first state to give every kid a Chromebook, but then there was no support for the students and there was no support for the teachers, and then obviously that did not show such improvement, and that's kind of why we've done a rollout of high school, and then elementary school, and now middle school. So we can support our teachers to support our students in using these. I don't want it to be, here's the device, here you go,
Right.
walk away, figure it out, which is a large part of that grant that Melinda McKenna was able to get, to help get an integration coach in. And we want to keep on trying to find grant money to have people come in and work with our teachers one-on-one, hands-on, to help them to learn how to implement that. And when the teachers understand how to use it, then that's going to be the best way for our students to benefit from it. Long-term, just giving students access to technology who they may not have that access at home. We all think everyone has a computer at home. They might not. We took polls where a lot of people said, yes, I have a computer at home. They might have had one computer for a family of 6. We're providing the student with a device that it's not just for homework, it's for education. They can look up colleges, they can look up jobs, they can research what it is they want to do with their lives. We're opening up essentially the world's largest encyclopedia to them, but safely. We've got lots of healthy filtering on there for education-only purposes. But, you know, we're putting that information into their hands. So it's kind of like sending every child home with a huge current encyclopedia of resources. And, you know, that alone is worth its weight in gold. But another thing that, you know, I hear all the time from people who work in corporations, from people who are graduating students out of colleges, is that the jobs that they're going into, I read an article the other day that 85% of the jobs that the students are going to have in 2030 don't exist yet. Because the technology is moving so quickly that these jobs are creating. My job certainly didn't exist when I was a student in high school. This is a new requirement, and so many of these requirements for the way that the workforce is changing, the way that universities and research are changing, require the use of technology. So even if we don't look directly just at how does it affect test scores, how it affects students in their lives, I think that that's something that's immeasurable.
How's that for off the top of her head?
So can I ask a couple questions about, I love the Chromebook strategy. I think it's a really efficient and cost-effective way of getting technology in the hands of all of our students. Do we have additional computers within probably the middle school and the high school specifically with more processing power, where you can learn things like JavaScript, Perl, Python, R, like all those fun new technical languages that, like, somebody who works in the corporate world like me, I'm hiring, who can code, come talk to me. It's inappropriate, I'm sorry. But what are we doing with technology with more computing power?
Certainly. So, well, some of those languages that you did just mention, there are lots of emulators that do work on Chromebooks
Right.
to compile those. But we also have Windows labs. We have a Windows lab, 2 Windows labs at our middle school. One that's used specifically for computer science education. The other one that's used as a general use computer lab, but it's my hope with the access to the Chromebooks at the middle school next year that they'll be able to use that for more art instruction, like graphic design classes. That's something that some of the art teachers have expressed an interest in. So that licensing is budgeted in here for more graphic design, Adobe Creative Cloud at the middle school for that computer lab, so just keep on using it. We have an AutoCAD Windows lab at the high school. We have 2 art labs at the high school. We have a computer science Windows lab at the high school. They also have a cart of Android tablets that they use programming on to make apps. They do app development. So we're really exposed to a variety in terms of how we use the technology and the types of technology that are out there for the students. So.
We also start coding with students in the elementary school.
In 3rd grade, they start a regular curriculum, and it's actually goes along with the ISTE standards from the state, which are more recent technology and engineering standards that came down. They do coding activities, they do the engineering activities, the logic activities, robotics, starting very young.
And Jen, how does just going, piggybacking off her question, there's a set of laptops that were purchased when the middle school was being completed. How does that blend into your plan?
So, student devices, truly with what our wonderful children due to them. They don't last more than 3 years. Right now, my biggest burden in terms of technology support are the middle school cows. They are coming up on 3 years of use at this point, as the middle school will be at.
That's only 3 years?
Right,
Oh.
so yeah, they're coming up on it, and we're updating them and changing things all the time. I know Phil and Bridget and I were just arranging a care and keeping of the laptops meeting at the middle school right now, which we haven't had to do with the other schools, just because they're a bit more cumbersome. So they, unfortunately, they don't play into this plan. It'll be time to recycle them soon. We may try to keep some of them as spares for if teacher laptops break, having some backstock. I'll see if we are able to get anything back from them, so maybe that if we are able to get any money, then that can go towards technology wish list items that have been cut and those kinds of things. But they won't be in use by students next year.
Yeah, because I was on the committee and I know how much we spent on those.
Yeah.
And we're debating about Chromebooks,
Yeah.
between Chromebooks and this, but eventually after some people did some research, it looked like this was a better buy.
Did they ever think to ask Jen?
She wasn't here.
And I can tell you, I was meeting with a technology representative from one of the largest technology for education suppliers this afternoon, and he reiterated to me that there are schools out there that are using Windows. There are schools out there that choose to use iPads. 90% it's Google. We're not doing anything off course.
Outside that, yeah.
If the cost and what you can get out of it for the cost, that's what makes it so worth it for schools.
Cows and computers on wheels?
Cows on computers on wheels, yes.
For the new TVs that you're looking to purchase, are they insured?
Not insured, we're looking at 5-year warranties, so we're talking about a 4-year lease with a 5-year warranty, meaning even after they're paid off, then we'll still have an additional year of zero cost, no matter what happens to them, kind of a guarantee. So these things are they're not gonna grow legs and disappear on their own, because they are so large and either mounted to walls or they're on stands that they're larger than a horse to try to get out of the building when they're on the stand. So that answers your question.
It does.
Okay.
I just have to put this in there, and with the safety and security in our school systems, no one could get in there to take them out either.
Right. And Dr. Della, have we set up the security desk at the entrance?
In the front?
Yeah.
It's not there yet. It's coming now.
It's coming.
Yeah. It's gonna be a nice security addition for the school.
Yeah.
And you have done, just one second, you have done a phenomenal job.
Yes, absolutely.
For us. We really appreciate that. And you've not even talked about some of the grants that I know that you and Melinda have applied for that we have gotten. But I want to publicly thank you for that. That's the teachers, the administrators, everyone has talked about. We're into the 22nd century here in North Haven, so thank you for that.
Appreciate it, and as long as we have kids who want to keep
Yeah, that's what
learning
we're
it, I'm always
taxing,
gonna
right?
keep on trying to find what it is that they're interested in, and that's great.
It was great. In addition to preparing kids for like a 21st century, 22nd century graduation and job environment and, the real world situations, I think one of the benefits of technology can be cost savings. Have you identified cost savings that you could tell us a little bit about over the past couple of years that you can kind of just help me understand within the budget?
Certainly. I don't know, some of it might be in things like library books. So while at our elementary schools, we're starting to use Capstone Library, which I believe Melinda mentioned earlier, where we buy these perpetual licenses to ebooks. And what's nice about an ebook and a perpetual license means we buy it once, and then any child in the school could be reading the same ebook at the same time on their computers or even at home. So it's like buying one copy of the book for the entire school instead of literally buying to have that book for every child. And then we can slowly build those libraries every year to have more and more books in there. And I certainly think that's a cost savings when you talk about having to replace those books and also offering access to some of these titles. Instead of buying 10 for the library of someone's favorite title, you can buy one from Capstone. The high school is starting to do something very similar with Overdrive, the Sora app. Which it works a little bit differently because the titles are a little bit differently for older students. But there are a lot of titles in there that you might want to read. I know it's a popular app with a lot of people, and they're interactive, and so sometimes it's audio, sometimes it'll follow along with the text, so it also offers a little bit of assistive technology for different students as well. So I think that library books are part of it, that those librarians are able to get more bang for their buck out of that. And then not having to replace them, obviously, with the perpetual licenses. I think social studies this year at the middle school, they're making a big move, and I think science as well, towards some of the curriculum materials, instead of buying paper materials, putting these into technology instead, online programs, and I'm going to forget some of the names of the programs, but I know that social studies at the middle school is using one this year. I want to say Actively Learn, that they were doing as instead of, in addition to like a classroom set of textbooks and then the online portions. So I don't have a quantified number of what it's saving, but I work directly with the coordinators of each of the areas, and then also coordinate with Melinda, who oversees all of the coordinators and the curriculum. So we know that there's a cost savings happening in terms of having
printing too.
Yes, the printing too.
And more digital materials to students instead of printing and having hard copy.
Yes, yeah, we're able to save in terms of the printing costs. So when students do their work and they turn it in through Google Classroom, or they email it to their teacher, or they just share it with them in Office 365 or in Docs, that's one less piece of paper that has to get printed, or sometimes two less pieces of paper that have to get printed because you print it the first time and it's not what you really wanted. So, different ways.
Thanks.
Anything else? Other questions for Jen? So, all of this, and Frank, you have some information that's sort of a follow-up from last week. Do you want to go over that with the board?
Yeah, which piece did you want me to go over?
I think that you had taught, the board asked about student activity accounts and revenues. The board asked about revenues.
Okay.
And so you did some research on that, and maybe we could just provide them with some information.
Okay, I'll take a few minutes just to go over.
Yeah, that's right.
This was a very, very interesting exercise that you asked for last week, and I'll pass these around. I need 15 now, if I have enough for everybody. I'll wait till it gets around. I'll go over it, and I'm going to give you some of my observations of the things that I found in putting this together. The question was, what revenue sources does the Board of Education have? So this is broken down. The first column is, did you?
No.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, here, give me one.
The first column is the source, and that's the town. And it's referred to as Fund 1. So when you look at financial reports, you usually see the 1 there, which tells us it's the Board of Education's operating budget. And it's $53,052,836. Town appropriation to the board for your day-to-day operations. That is the budget we go to the taxpayers for and say, this is what we're looking for. The next source is federal funds coming into the district, and we call it Fund 20. So if we want to see what's coming in, we code in Fund 20, and it gives us a printout of the federal budgets. Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, the IDEA, which is the special education budgets, grants, Perkins grant, the business grant, and then I have comments on the side, restricted to specific use, expenses charged directly to the grant. So it's just not a freebie grant.
Right.
With this
Right.
grant, the strings are attached to it, you have to follow the guidelines, and this is all audited, so they're pretty strict on it. So we're getting $912,906 in federal grants coming to the Board of Ed.
Those grants are called entitlement grants, which means that we apply for them every year because we're submitting, in essence, what our program is and how we're using the resources. But they're very specific about what we must use the resources for.
A lot of guidance.
A lot of that.
A lot of guidelines. The next grouping is the state, and I broke this down into two different areas, and this is where a lot of times there's confusion. The first one from the state, and I have the fund, is called the town fund. This doesn't go to the Board of Ed. You do not see this at all. This is part of the town's budget, the ECS, Education Cost Sharing. Totally different from excess costs, which I'll get to in a moment. But the ECS money goes directly to the town, and the town treats it as a revenue to offset taxes. They count it just like general taxation. If you look in the town's budget, you'll see a line item there as education grants, and it's called ECS, and right now there's $3.4 million the town gets directly for the general fund. Although it says it's for education, it goes to balance the town's budget. The town also gets $6,557 for adult education. Again, that's treated by the town as a revenue source. So the big item here is the ECS. This is the state share to the town to provide for public education per the state's constitution.
And that, last week we talked about how that is determined, and Dot had that handout about, because it's a very convoluted formula.
Is it, I'm sorry,
No, that,
is it general practice for all towns to do that with the ECS?
Yes, yes. The ECS is designated as a revenue source to the towns. And when the town looks at it, they're saying, okay, we're getting this money, but at the same time, we're giving all this additional money to the Board of Ed and the appropriation, so this only partially offsets the cost of education. Education is a shared responsibility of the state and the municipality. It's a shared responsibility. And this ECS money, which has evolved over the years and the format keeps changing, it's a very political aspect because who gets more money? And if you take a city like New Haven or Bridgeport and you look at the size of the ECS grant that goes to those cities, it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. On the other hand, if you look at a Greenwich, a Darien, a Wilton, it's minuscule, if anything, because it's based on the wealth of the community. One of the factors is the wealth of the community. So you receive $3.4 million, the town receives, and that's standard practice, the town treats it as a revenue. So I've broken this down and said this is the subtotal that goes directly to the town, and when the governor's budget comes out next month, everyone looks very anxious to see. There's a whole list of grants that come to the town, the LoSiP money, the ECS money, transportation money, the whole variety of things, and they look right here, this is the largest single grant of the state to municipalities to help them out. So we'll see what that number is for next year. I gave my own estimates in your budget book you already received, what I'm estimating for next year, but we'll see what the governor does.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Because your estimates were about $400,000 over what we have on this piece of paper here, right? Over last year.
Yes.
For the ECS funding specifically,
Yes.
sorry. So it's about $400,000 additionally, and that estimate is based on the adjustment to the formula going, I think Dot had given us that sheet that previously we were 90-10 housing prices versus income, and now it's 70-30 housing prices versus income for a place like North Haven. Is that where the additional $400,000 came from?
No.
No.
The town is conservative in its revenue estimates, And this 3.4 million is in the current town's budget.
Okay.
So if you look at that, you'll find that, and I have it in my office. I kind of like reading town budgets. There's a lot of interesting things in them. I think it's a very conservative number. I think it's on the low side. And you'll see when it comes out, what the final.
Just to be clear, we don't determine what the ECS revenue is going to be or how much we're going to allocate for
Right.
ECS revenue. That comes from the town when they do their revenues.
The town does the revenues, they look at them and, they're estimates by the town because they're doing this a lot of times before the General Assembly has adopted their budget. So it's an estimate from the town, so that was their estimate. I think it's on the low side, which is great.
But the towns tend to run conservative.
And that's good, because you want to finish off, the town needs to finish off the year with a surplus rather than a deficit. So it's, anyway, I think it's a conservative number. The number I put in the budget book for next year is $400,000 higher. I think that's where ECS is going to be, but we don't know yet because with the new governor and how he's going to look at things, but we'll see.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. The next one, also from the state, and that's called Fund 10. When we do the financial reports, we want to look at the state money, we look at Fund 10, and this is the excess cost. Reimbursement to the Board of Ed for the high-cost special ed students that we're talking about, that Dan was talking about earlier. This is the amount of money that currently is estimated in the budget for the excess cost. So when we incur those high-cost students, this state gives us money to reimburse us. And this is the tricky part of the budget. We have in your budget book an explanation of how excess cost works and how it's only a partial refunding. And in my latest financial report we gave you last week, I talk about the fact that your financial reports are showing big growing deficits in the transportation line item and in the tuition line item. Once the first check comes in, the end of February, that will be applied to reduce your expenditures. Not increase your budget, it will reduce your expenditures to bring that back, so you will not be showing those kinds of deficits.
Frank, last week you did a great job explaining excess costs, but last week we didn't have NHTV here. Is it possible that you could do a quick summary of what you talked about last week so that anyone who's watching at home would get a better understanding of what that truly means and what the percentage of reimbursement is and how it works?
All right, I'm going to give the Reader's Digest version.
Sure.
The state recognizes that special education is mandated to provide special services for children in need. And the mandate means that when our special ed director writes out a purchase order for $300,000 to this particular location to provide these services, we have to approve of that purchase order, even though I'm seeing a red line, a deficit in there. And so we have all of these special education children that are high cost, and the state says, okay, town, we will reimburse you because we recognize these are mandates. Good so far. What happens is the calculation is based on each student. And once the Board of Ed reaches its minimum threshold, and its minimum threshold that the board has is $74,291. And what that means is the Board of Education has to spend $74,000 on each student before the reimbursement formula kicks in. So if you spend $150,000 on a student, you technically would get reimbursed 150 minus the 74. You would be getting that amount of reimbursement, technically speaking.
Well, 70% of that.
Yes, that's important.
So that's what happens. Instead of taking the full amount you should be getting, the state said, well, our budget's tight. We're only going to reimburse you 70% of the money we owe you. So that means the Board of Ed has to eat the first 74,000 plus the 30% the state isn't funding, okay? And so it becomes a high-cost item. The state then says, all right, to make sure we're funding this properly, when we give you your check in February, we're only going to give you 75% of the 70%. So we have to look at that first check to see how much are we going to get reimbursed, because the pie is a fixed pie for the whole state. And you are competing with Bridgeport, and Waterbury, and New Haven in regard to how many special ed students they have. So depending on how much everyone puts in for, will depend if you're really going to get 70%, or maybe 69%, or maybe you're 71, because the pie is fixed. And so it gets divided up by the number of students. So that check comes in, it goes to the town, and the town of North Haven is very good. I'm very impressed with how the town works with the Board of Ed on special ed. That immediately is turned over basically to the Board of Ed. We use it then to reduce our expenditures. So when you look at your financial report that you'll receive for the end of January, you're going to see big deficits. When that money is applied, either by the end of February or early March, you're going to see a significant drop in the special education expenditures. The other tidbit on this is that if special ed has 10 students at $74,000 apiece, you get zero reimbursement. You will spend $740,000 for those students, as opposed to having just a couple of students that are up above there that where you receive the reimbursement. That in a nutshell is what it is. There are other quirky things in there. For example, we get notified that the state has placed students in special education facilities. Town, here's the bill. You don't even know what's coming.
Right, that's the unknown, that's part of the unknown.
It's a big unknown. And so the state says, well, because we're placing it, the formula changes from 74,000, it drops down to a lower level kind of thing. So that in a nutshell is how excess cost works.
Thanks.
It is money by statute that is guaranteed to the Board of Education. However, I've been in some really sticky situations where the town says, we're keeping it. And so it creates real problems.
That isn't what we face here. The town is extremely good about it.
They're very good. I'm really impressed with the setup you have here. And the special education budget, if you look at it, you see some of the costs going down. That's because we have applied a lot of the excess cost money to those line items. So we are basically netting out the special education budget, anticipating this money coming in.
Thank you very much.
And a report.
Thanks.
Do you want to talk about that last group of revenues, Frank?
Okay.
Quickly.
The last group of revenues, so in effect, you have $58,915,000 of monies for education in North Haven. You're big. This is no small potatoes. Then we took a look at some of the other funds, and I labeled this other revenue sources that are in and out all year, very restricted activities for last year, because the money's coming in all during the year. So I took last year. Fund 40, which is a scholarship fund. You had a large scholarship last year of $100,000. And so...
So that number is a bit misleading because it was that
We're hoping to keep it going.
Yeah, right. But it was that one-time donation in honor of graduates from a family member. So.
Then we have Fund 41, which is $625,000. This includes preschool fees, Medicaid reimbursement, elementary school student activities, clubs, teams, athletics, yearbook, extended day program. People are paying for these items and the money goes right out. So it's not a surplus, it's very specific when that money comes in, what it's used for. and it goes right out. There's a lot of movement in that account. Fund 43 is cash at the high school level, student activities, clubs, yearbook, athletics. The graduating class, if you look at the detail, you see all this money that's in that account from various graduating classes and how much is left over. And Russ and I have had discussions on how to spend some of that money for classes that are a few years old right now. Rental fees. Last year, $38,237 taken in. Fees for building rentals, and this includes the rental and the custodial overtime transferred to the town. Fees for custodial overtime, we just changed that, I mentioned this last week, we just changed that recently so that there's more of a reimbursement back to the Board of Ed for the overtime that you incur, because those are costs you're incurring. And you don't have control over those costs, and your overtime can go up and go down in addition to snowstorms, but the use of your facilities, because you have to have a custodian present when your facilities are being used. So now we've worked it out that the custodial overtime charge will be reimbursed back to the Board of Ed, which helps stabilize your budget a little bit. We do not charge if there's a custodian already on duty in the school. We just absorb that as part of the regular fee. And the Board of Ed has a formal policy of who gets charged, and there's different levels of categories that you develop your policies over the year as to who uses your facilities and what the priority is, and do they get charged or don't get charged. And that's your former board policy. And the last one we talked about deals with the health self-insurance fund and employee contribution, retiree contributions, the teachers' retirement board, and COBRA. These monies we now track and go into the health self-insurance fund. These are co-pays by employees, not board money. These are employees, retirees, co-payments for health insurance, $1.1 million. These funds are received from the employee payroll deductions, TRB contributions, COBRA payments, and these are sent to the town along with the Board of Education appropriations for health insurance, and that is all the money pouring into the self-insurance fund. So there's a lot, when you look at all this, there's almost $60 million of cash flow that the board is responsible for. It's no small potatoes. It's very significant.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this for us, too.
Yeah.
Way for us to understand it.
Okay, good.
See it in black and white, where the money did, where the money goes.
Any other questions for Arnie? So when we submitted the budget to you, the budget stood at a 2.9% increase. And that is what I am recommending to the board in terms of what we will need to continue our programming for next year. And if you have other ideas, that's fine, and we'll work with you. We work together to find out how we're going to do that. But my recommendation would be the 2.9%.
Okay. Looks like we're all in agreement with that.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need a motion.
So we did,
Great budget.
we have it posted as a vote.
Okay.
So if you could make a motion,
Sure. I make a motion to submit the budget to the Board of Finance at, what's a 2.9% increase?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? I'm sorry, any discussion? Sorry, I don't have my G notes. Any against? Motion passes.
terrific. So that's what we will submit to the town.
On February 2nd, correct?
Well, yes. we-
Beforehand, but we have
Right.
our official one on
Right.
February 2nd.
Frank, you wanted to say something?
Just a brief comment. We've gotten some updated figures from the town. So We'll adjust the line, couple line items we have to adjust for updated figures to make it fit the
Right,
2.9.
but we will stay at 2.9%.
And that will be the board's budget. And the board, the town will receive a booklet just like you received, except it's gonna say now the Board of Education's budget.
So that is the 2019, 2020, gosh.
How,
I feel like we should
how
have to
will
wear
we know
like
which,
silver jumpsuits.
which line items you're taking?
We'll point those out to you. Once that document is completed, I think at the February, well, even before that, we would point that out to you, even if it's through, in writing, the line items that were impacted. Okay.
We don't have our next board meeting until February.
Right, 13.
You can schedule it.
Is it the 14th? Okay.
It is Valentine's Day.
It's on Valentine's Day? Well,
Well, I'm well past that stage that I have to be with a significant other. I'm not-
Bring our wives.
well, we could be together, though.
Celebrate Valentine's Day every day?
Us in a heart.
That's right.
Excuse me, meeting adjourned? Make a motion to.
May I make a motion to, have a motion to adjourn this meeting
7:40.
at 7:40? So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any against? Motion passes.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.